about the paper, the environment alone. Don't think about my money or my loss of earnings or anything else, but just the industry to make what will ultimately go in the bin.
Hello, Paulus. How are you?
Very well, Russell. Nice to see you. Thanks for having me.
Nice to see you too. Welcome to the 300 Thoughts channel. In a moment, you're going to talk about flyers and posters and hard copy promotion, the stuff that we send around to venues. We're going to get onto that in a moment. First of all, tell us all about you. What do you do? How did you get here? What are you doing at the moment? Anything you like.
Well, I suppose what's pertinent to this conversation is the show that I'm currently touring the UK with. So I have well, it's not a solo show. I have a piano player as well, but it is a very small scale piece of theatre. It's very easy to launch. That's the good news. And it celebrates the music of Victoria Wood. And you and I share my dear friend and director, Sarah Louise Young, in common. I know she's well, you've worked with her and she's worked with you on many projects, and often they're small scale theatre too, right?
Yep. Yeah, absolutely.
So that's what I'm doing since Edinburgh last year. I've been sporadically since September, and now we're talking in, what is it, July? Oh, it's July. And on and off I've been going around the country with the show. And what's so curious is we go from 70-seater nightclub / cabaret spaces to, so far, 400-seater theatres. Some are studio spaces, some are art centres that don't have aren't linked to a larger space, and as I say, some are really little and much more sort of relaxed in their layout for the auditorium. So it's been very interesting to meet so many different venue owners, organisers and technicians. Very interesting indeed.
Yeah. And so you're also known as Paulus the Cabaret Geek.
Not Greek, which is what's happening on the radio. Every time I do a live radio program, somebody goes, and we're talking to the Cabaret Greek. And I'm like, that's totally appropriation. I'm totally not.
Oh, yeah, no, I definitely knew it was geek. I knew it was geek. So it's safe to say then that your background is cabaret.
Yeah. The idea, for anyone that wants to know, the idea of working without a fourth wall between you and the audience. That's the quickest way I can put it, really. I'm a musical performer, predominantly trained in musical theatre, so I sing my way through that. But I think you can do cabaret in many different ways. But yeah, mine tends to be music based.
Okay, cool. Right, so let's get to the juice of the interview. You put out something, I think it was on Twitter or Facebook. You put a kind of a video of you in your house with piles of your flyers and posters, etc. And I just went, oh yeah. And I thought, yeah, that's absolutely what my cupboard is, a little bit like that as well. So this post for me really started to discuss the idea of sending all of these posters out into the universe to these venues that we're touring to, etc., but actually that we're coming back with hundreds in our suitcase, that they don't seem to be actually reaching the public or into the hands of public or whatever. And then you think, oh my god, I thought that money into that, and it's quite an upfront fee, really, isn't it, as well, because you've got to get it to them for at least 2 to 3 months before sometimes. And so I really liked that honesty that you put into that post, and that's what made me want to get you on the channel. I just thought, actually, we need to have this conversation, because I'm not sure it's actually been had very often. I know maybe 5-10 years ago there was a conversation about, are flyers effective? But that seems to not have been solved, because flyers and posters are still being requested anyway.
Yeah, they are.
It's the amounts that are being requested, and then also once we're sending them, are they being used?
What's going on with them? Yeah.
And my question really is to you, what made you actually go, you know what, I'm putting this out there?
So just for a little more context, I think it was a still, and you can see my flyer right here behind me. So we were talking about some A5 flyers, and the photo was me sat on the floor. I'm 5'10". It's me sat on the floor with a pile of these flyers, which went up to here with me sort of leaning on. So I'm sitting cross-legged on the floor. So if you can imagine how many A5 flyers that is. And you're quite right. What I've been doing since September last year. Actually, no, it's January last year. So we're talking about around 27 venues between January and May. And whilst traveling around and going to perform my show in these venues, I deliberately collected back all unused flyers. And I would ask whoever it was on duty when I arrived, I would say, if you've got any in a box or in a cupboard somewhere, no harm, no argument going to be had here, but I can reuse these. So give them to me and I'll take them away. And same with posters too. And I did do. And that's what I ended up with nearly 6 months later. And the reason I put the post online was because actually I'd read an article by Lynn Gardner about the issue with a fellow sort of small scale theatre maker who had been bemoaning basically their relationship with marketing departments during their tour and this experience they've been having. And it touched on, flyers and posters being ordered and going in a cupboard, but it spoke of many other things too. There were some, West End producers quoted, and all basically concerned, from this article at least, about marketing predominantly and the treatment of small scale theatre visiting companies.
Okay.
So that was my motivation to do it, and basically I wanted Lynn Gardner to see it and go, oh good, we'll interview him as well. But she didn't. She just liked it, and then yesterday's chip paper, which is a shame because I think there's a lot more to say on the subject. And although I think it's great that she obviously has covered it, and some people have been weighing in, I wonder, how big a conversation or broad a conversation this is. I feel probably it isn't.
So was there much reaction to it from, when you posted it out? Did you get any sort
of... No, I didn't. Just eye rolling mostly, and fellow performers saying typical, par for the course, I think. In fact, if I'm completely honest with you, I was quite upset by some of the comments because the vast majority of them sort of went, yeah. It's, bake it in, bake that wasted money into your budget. Is what seemed to be when you boiled down the response I was getting from people, and I think that's a dreadful reaction. If you think, just think about the paper, the environment alone. Don't think about my money or my loss of earnings or anything else, but just the industry to make what will ultimately go in the bin and never be used. That's corrupt. It's dreadful. Every single day we talk about climate change, we talk about new net zero targets, and the theatre clearly have no interest whatsoever as an industry in doing their part on that. This is that, from that point of view alone, it's a disgrace.
Yeah. So what do you think is happening then? So after you order your posters online and you spent time to design them, and then you look at your contract and you have to have so many posters and flyers by a certain date, and off you go, you send them.
Yeah.
What's happening, do you think, between that moment for you and then you rocking up to the venue and then walking away with 3 boxes that you actually ordered? Do you know what I mean? What do you think? What have you found? Have you found any sort of like bits of information you go, right, that's why that's happened? Or have you got any hunches? Or
well, so here's the glib honest answer to what's happening. Bugger all's happening. Clearly they're going in a cupboard and they're being wasted, but that's not helpful. So obviously from around 27 venues since January, I could tell you confidently, I think just 2 are paperless now. So the Wales Millennium Centre don't take any paper posters or flyers. If you begged them on your hands and knees, they wouldn't take them. And Chichester Festival Theatre, they didn't want any print either. And I'm glad to say that the Venn diagram of that is that both those venues sold out, and they sold out fast as well. Chichester sold out to 300 seaters, the Minerva. So one of the biggest places we've ever performed at the beginning of the tour. Yeah, they sold out within more than a month before the show had opened, without a single piece of paper being printed. Yeah. So there's that to bear in mind. There are many other places that were great that said, only send me a few, we won't use a lot, or this is how many we'll need, and by God, were they accurate? So this isn't about everywhere. But I would say that the bigger the venue, and if we're talking about a studio space that is linked to a larger venue, then I'm classing that as a bigger venue, because studio spaces tend to just sort of be run alongside the main theatre in a similar way, and perhaps get overlooked. Their needs perhaps get overlooked at the same time. And we could expand this conversation to technicians and the types I get given for my little show if you want to. It depends how long we've got. The saddest story is, and you're quite right, what's different about this situation is that you and I and our friends Tracy Collins, Sarah Louise Young, the wonderful Mark Farrelly, Helen, I've forgotten Helen's surname, Helen Anker is doing a show about Audrey Hepburn these days. You know, there's lots of people doing these one-person or very small-scale productions, traveling around in a suitcase, on a train. It's very much, you know, here I am with it all in my bag. And so what we have is the benefit, or the terrible sadness of being the ones who realize, oh, so I spent my own personal money on print, and you asked me for a specific amount of things. I dutifully sent exactly what you asked for. And then months down the line, here I am at your venue, and I'm standing in the auditorium, and there's nothing up. And then what happens, this is probably the most galling part of the whole situation for me, Russell, is that somebody from the front of house wants to come up to you and talk to you about walk-ups. How do you think I'm going to have any walk-ups, love? Tell me, please tell me. Imagine you've just walked in and you don't work at this venue. Look around this auditorium. Tell me what's on tonight. How would I possibly know what's on tonight? Oh, no, your show's on tonight, so they've come down because it's the day of your show. I'm sorry. You take the show posters and flyers away before the show's happened. And you still think there'll be walk-up on the day, even though you've taken the print away. I mean, to me, that's insane in itself, and it's a very, very common policy. I think that's bonkers. I think that needs questioning. But ultimately, at the venue, which I will not name, the worst situation was that I did say to them, I'm standing in your foyer and I cannot see any print. There are 8 flyer racks here in this foyer, and not a single one has my flyer in it. It's exactly the right size for your flyer racks. I know you have them. That seems curious to me. There are also no posters. Well, why is that? Now, whilst I was talking to the front of house woman about this, a helper from behind the bar, who was obviously straddling a few different jobs, he popped to the storeroom and he came out with this huge box. This huge box. Now, he's a fan of mine, and that's why he did it. I didn't ask him to do it. He just appeared. Huge box with all my posters on top of it, including an A0 poster, which should have gone up on probably show day only. And that was still in the cupboard too. So we're talking about, in this one theatre example, we're talking about plus postage, because of the way you have to order online multiple flyers from companies like Solo Press. Other companies are available, and they're not bad price-wise, but when you add all the postage to it, it gets really, really very expensive, almost doubles the price of your print. We're talking about just over £200 that they ordered and put in a cupboard and wasted.
It's weird. You reminded me of my experience last year, and so I have a show called the Bobby Kennedy Experience, and I took it to a very prolific theatre, and I was in their very prolific studio space. And what I found interesting, and because I had the same situation, I walked into the bar and there were no posters and no flyers. Now, I chose my battle on that day because I wanted to do my show. And I knew that I'd sold, I think, probably like 40 tickets per night, which I was very, very proud of. And I think it held something like 70 or something. And I'd done a lot of self-promotion before anyway. I connected with the various groups or radio stations, whatever, in that town. And what afterwards I thought about it, I thought, you know what, this is really strange, because I particularly picked this venue because I knew the demographic of that town would actually want to see something about the Kennedys in the 60s. I thought, this is perfect. So what I found was interesting is that actually there seems to be a disjoint maybe in that particular venue, that they don't know that actually if you promote my show, you earn money too. This was the box office split. So, you know, you're going to walk away a little bit more money.
Well, I think, I really, really want to unpack the whole box office split here with you, Russell, because I think we're all very confused as to what that split is for, actually. But before we do, let me just come back and tell you my experience. So this venue that I'm telling you about is a 300-seater. They'd sold 100 tickets. There's 200 tickets left to sell. Decided to take the posters down, and I actually refused to perform until I got an answer to what was going on. So I basically went on strike, a one-person strike plus piano player who had no choice in the matter. And I said, get me an executive on the phone, or ideally here, actually. I would like to speak to somebody in charge. This is appalling. And I'd like some answers. Otherwise, this show isn't happening in 3 hours' time.
Good for you. What happened?
Well, the woman I was on the phone with was looking after a baby, quite clearly. She was very sorry, very distressed, but clearly couldn't leave her child. Someone else was on holiday. And so actually the only exec available was the head of tech. So very much not his job. And he very much did not want to be called into work to deal with a very angry me. And made that really clear, to be honest with you, which didn't help the matter at all, because I'm confronted with somebody who doesn't want to be there. And like, well, you haven't tried to market my show. You now don't even want to have a conversation with me. So I'm feeling really welcomed right now, you know. Ultimately, I said to them, look, you've wasted a lot of my money and a lot of my time and resources, and I think it's a disgrace, and I'm looking at performing to 100 people instead of 300, and I can only put that down to the wastage and the thoughtlessness that you've caused here. So this is what I want. I want the money back for all the print I sent you, and I want a bump in my box office split. And I want that in writing before I agree for this show to go ahead in what is now an hour and a half's time. So he said, how much is the print? I said, I don't know, whatever you ordered. Well, can't you tell me? I said, no, I'm standing here in a theatre getting ready to put on a show. Why can't your department? Oh, they're not here either. Okay, so it's all right for them to not be on call, but I need to have the answers to everything you ask me. No, it doesn't matter how much it is. We can assume a ballpark, can't we? But you're paying it no matter what it is. And they agreed. He came back, he said, I've got an agreement, but it wasn't in writing. So I sent him away again. I said, I want this in writing. He said, do you need it in writing? I said, I've never met you before, my love. You don't even want to be here talking to me. With the greatest respect, yes, I would like that in writing. And that's what happened. And I did the show and I got the money back. But I don't want to travel the country having to have arguments and fights like that, and you know, ruin potential great relationships with lovely spaces. Who wants that?
Yeah. Would you ever go back to that venue?
It was quite recent, and it would be too soon. Would I ever go back? With a guarantee? Yeah, with a guarantee. Absolutely. And I write notes, as I'm sure you do, you know, my tour schedule. Every single venue has got a column of notes. This is how I was treated. This is how, you know, what the technicians were like. This is what marketing was like. This is what, you know, whether I sold any merch or not, and whether any bugger turned up. I put it all down and try and think of, you know, would I go back? And some of them, I'm no, not in a million years. I don't want to be treated like that. But mostly it's yes, if there's a flat fee and it's not about my risk, then of course it would be a different situation. You know, that's the most dramatic and sort of saddest it's got, really. And it's a great shame that it got to that. And nobody wants to have those confrontations. But I think what's rare, as I alluded to earlier on, is for the theatres to be confronted with somebody who's basically saying, "I've got you." Because nobody, if you're in the, right, let's imagine you're on tour in The Lion King, right? You rock up to a theatre to do a show for a week or 2 weeks or whatever it is. Who's there on the ground that is also there in the office ordering the print and having conversations with marketing departments? Most likely, no one. No one at all. And who's got skin in the game on the ground there on the day when it comes to how many tickets have been sold? If you're in the cast of The Lion King, you've got no skin in the game whatsoever. You get your fee, you get your fee. It doesn't matter if there's 200 people in the room or 10 people in the room or how many of those seats have been papered. You don't care, do you? You just go to work and you do your job. But it's not like that for us. And for me, I've invested over £50,000 of my own money. I have no investors, no sponsors. It's me and my husband's money. And that's what I've spent on building my tribute to Victoria Wood. And I will not have any venue jeopardize that.
Yeah, it's fascinating, isn't it? Because you just think there's such a disjoint, and this isn't everywhere, obviously, because there are wonderful theatres out there with supportive, you know.
Yeah, there are, and I've been to loads in the last 6 months. Really lovely places. I don't want to name any names, good or bad, because of that, you know, there lies madness. But yeah, you're right.
And it's and I sometimes see it in the teaching space, because I live in that space sometimes, and I see the way the things are promoted and things aren't promoted, etc. And sometimes I think there is an element of marketing by way of one size fits all.
Yeah. Oh yes, absolutely.
And not a bespoke thing like which we desire it to be. Because again, it was my Kennedy example. I thought, this is a town with plus 60s, like it's full of 60 plus people who live there, and I thought they would be in on this. I know. And I thought, but what happened was the theatre, the department I was dealing with, didn't really know what or who Bobby Kennedy was actually. Which is fair, but also all my marketing supplies them with that information, and you would hope that then would go, right, what's my demographic for this, to sell this for this show, blah 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 blah. So again, who knows what the reasons are, but I walked away from that one. I thought this time I've been they used a one size fits all marketing strategy, and the big show in the big space takes precedent. And it's such a weird kind of like shooting themselves in the foot in some way, because you're like, yeah, but you've got this incredible, beautiful studio space as well. Like this no shabby space. I'm like, why is this not being given equal measure? This says more about you.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. You know, I've had more than one conversation, very curious conversation with venue staff at venues that have basically, in not so many words, said to me, yeah, no, for our studio, these are really good sales. Well, we're not sold out, love. So as far as I'm concerned, it's a failure. I want all my shows sold out. I want every single seat filled, because that's all profit to me. That's my margin and the merch I can sell to those people, of course. So don't come to me with, this is a 200-seater, we've sold 120 and we're all over the moon. No, crack on and sell the other 80. But you're absolutely right. And what I didn't know when I started out my tour last September, and, you know, lesson learned again, was that venues would tell you to send them the same amount of print for a one-off, and sure, you're the same one-off show at a venue, and that's it, one performance off your tootle. the same amount of print as they would be asking for the tour of the Lion King, who were visiting for 3 or 4 weeks. How thoughtless is that? Yeah. So I talked to an old friend who for many, many years worked in the theatre, and I said, it seems so strange to me and almost patronizing to the other party that I have to say to every single venue I get into bed with, I have to say, can I just remind you that I'm visiting for 1 day, please don't over order. And she said, and yet that is what you will have to do. Well, that's dumb. It's dumb, and it's a waste of everybody's time. So I've actually set up a new thing. You know what a deal memo is, don't you, Russell? But for those people listening that don't, basically, when you're sort of broaching the idea of having a contract between a venue, a visiting company, and a theatre, before the contract is agreed, a deal memo is set up. And often the deal memo is taken by gospel by the venue, even though it isn't a signed document, which causes a whole barrel of other issues. But yeah, the deal memos, I think, are a very curious thing, and coming along with the deal memo is the split that we alluded to earlier on, which I don't want to forget about. But in response to the things I learned in the first sort of 6 months or so, I set up a thing called a standard terms document. And before they send their deal memo document to me, I get in there and I go, these are my terms. This is what I'm ideally looking for. I want this much of a box office split. I'm not that registered, because they all need to know that ultimately. This is the accounts department. This is how to contact me. This is how much PRS you should be charging me for the type of theatre that I have created, because they all get that wrong. In my case, probably yours as well. And bom, 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 bom. This is what I'll accept for you to take percentage-wise of merchandise if you're going to be as hideous as to do so on a small-scale theatre production. But this is how much I'll accept. And they can argue that we can have a conversation, but I'm starting that conversation, and we start with, this is what I want, and that's helped a tremendous amount. And I'm astonished at how many people have agreed to absolutely everything I want. You just have to be bold enough to ask for it, or to push back when someone says 65-35. What?
No, I had 50-50 the other week. And I was like,
whoa,
you're kidding me. And also, every time I teach student spaces, I say to them, if anybody ever asks you to do a 50-50 box office split, say no, and see ya. It's just bizarre. Tell us about the box office split then, because you said you wanted to not forget that. You wanted to say something about it.
I don't think we know. And when I say we, I mean my fellow theatre makers, myself included, this side of the fence, you and I don't think we really know what that percentage, let's say, for argument's sake, it's a 70-30 split, right? That's common, isn't it? 70-30 split in our favour, the visiting company. What is that 30% for? Because I think we're assuming it's for a whole bunch of things that the venue does not think that it's for, but no one is creating any clarity amongst both parties, all parties, what that percentage the venue is taking, what it's supposed to cover. So I've been privy to marketing Contras on a few venues that I've gone to. I've pushed, so for anyone that doesn't know what I'm talking about, venue says, right, in order to market this show, we'd like to spend £500. You are going to pay 350 of that. We're going to pay 150 of that. We're going to do it all. So they will put the ads out. Their Facebook page will be the one that they put the promoted post on. It's their brochure, their newsletter. So they're going to be the ones that are proactively doing it. But we're going to take 350 out of your box office takes, and that's the contra part of the phrase, towards marketing. Now, some venues you have no choice. You have to agree and buy in to their marketing contra. But my question is, if we're being obliged to agree to a marketing contra as well as a box office split, then clearly the box office split isn't going towards the marketing department. So who is it going towards? And I'm not sure that we know, and I think we assume it goes towards certain things that it doesn't necessarily. And until that gets clear, I think I think we're all, venues and visiting companies, I think we're all going to be a little bit confused as to what's going on. I'm not, if there are very clear, very, you know, um, totally acceptable things that that percentage is going towards, great, I'm here for that conversation, but no one's telling me.
Yeah. Yeah, that's fascinating. I haven't really thought about that. I will think about that, and I'll try and get a venue owner on to talk about that as well. That might be interesting. Got to find somebody to step up. So let's kind of wrap this up on a positive note though as well, because we brushed on some things. So I was going to ask you, I was going to say to you, is there a satisfactory solution for the artist and for the venue? And I think we kind of flirted with that. I really like the idea that you send this document to them, and I've done very similar. Like I'm doing one night in September, and they asked for the number of flyers and posters, and I said, can we reduce those, because that just seems silly. And what I've started doing now is look at their sustainability policy on their website and say,
Yeah.
with reference to let's try and reduce that, and also micromanage where they all go. What do you think?
Yeah, that's great. And what do they think?
Well, to be honest, I don't really ever hear back on that. I've only done it twice. So, and I haven't been to those venues yet. So I'm going to see what the thing is. But I thought actually that's kind of the way, because like you say, the theatre, inverted loose commas. We are, we're lefties, and we're all like, climate change and blah, blah, blah. It's all that. Yeah, great. But we've got to do it on the ground. We've got to
No,
do
it's nonsense. It's nonsense and it's lies. There's a few things going on here, Russell. I don't want to go on for too long, and I don't want to be too negative, but I will say a couple more things, if I may, before we wrap up. And number one is good luck finding someone from a venue that wants to have this conversation, because in the what is now 35 venues that I have been to since January, would you like to guess how many have contacted me after the show? By the way, I'm the producer, I'm the tour booker, I'm everything. There's no one else to contact. How many have contacted me after the show and asked me for my feedback on my experience? Yeah, it's zero. It's absolutely zero. And and we're talking, in some cases, places like WMC and Chichester Festival Theatre. They don't do it either, And I find that so confusing. One venue, I alluded to the Lynn Gardner article, and it's not been the only one, talking about small scale theatre and marketing. And they said, "Oh, I didn't know about that. I'll have to seek that out." It was almost as if to say, "You just made that up." No, it's online right now, mate. It's over here. I think the other thing to say is that post-pandemic, everybody is a little bit still blurry-headed, and whether it be tech departments or marketing departments, I don't think we can underestimate that there are quite a lot of younger people who may not have been in the industry very long. They may have pivoted completely from what they did beforehand, or may have just come out of education. And I'm not going to blame those younger people, because it's middle management and a lack of training that is always at fault when it comes to that. But I do have to say, it does feel like some sort of youth club in some of the venues that I go to. Is just people running around, having a laugh, and doing a half-assed job of your show. And why would they bother? Because you're only there for 24, you're not there for 24 hours, you're there for 8 normally. And that's sad, and that's hard.
Yeah.
But positivity is what you wanted. Yeah, I think they are conversations that we've got to have. You're absolutely right. And the first thing to do is to sort of bring stuff up and say, this isn't going to work for me. That sort of thing about show business people are always ordering ridiculous riders for their dressing rooms.
Right, yeah.
I think I understand what's going on now. It's taken me a really long time. But I think for anybody like you and me listening that has a small scale production, I think what I've learned is it doesn't serve you to be timid. It doesn't serve you to be unclear about what you desire and what your production deserves and needs. Don't be like, it's fine, we don't need anything, it's just one dressing room and parking space, and we'll be grand, thank you. That isn't true. is it? Because you'll get there and you will need things. And then you'll be frustrated that they haven't got things. I mean, how many venues around this country don't have a coat hanger in them? It's astonishing to me. I mean, there's a clothes rail bolted to the wall of every single room you go into, but there isn't a single coat hanger in the building. So don't assume that people are going to have the things that you need, or that the venue that's been your, hometown, very comfy venue for a long time, that they're going to have those things. They're not. And they're doing different things with different people every single day. It's a multi-purpose space. It's very much on the day for most venues, and we have to bear that in mind. So get specific, get a rider, be clear about what you need.
Yeah, I don't know if mine's a positive note, but I think sometimes it reminds me when I used to work in the education system quite often. I go into primary schools, and you would know if this primary school was good within the first 5-10 minutes, whether it's actually working as a system, the atmosphere, the lot. And we always used to say that it's down to the head teacher. The head teacher is the captain of the ship. And it was kind of right. When we went into a school that was a little bit shaky, a little bit dodgy, a little bit not working properly, you met the head and you're like, yeah. I do dare to say that sometimes the leadership is to not blame, is responsible to make sure that a venue runs properly. I really believe that. And when you fantasize about, if I ever run a theatre, what would you do? You would make sure, you would ensure that the artist is at the center of it all, for sure, because without that, the theatre is nothing. And I do think that it's okay to not apportion blame, but just to say, actually, sometimes a business has to be led properly. A business has to be led properly.
Along with how many people have invited me to give them feedback, 0. I can tell you that there are, I would say maybe about 4 venues where the person that I've been dealing with in multiple emails and sometimes phone calls actually showed up on the day, welcomed me, shook my hand, introduced me to people. Just 4 out of around 27. That's not great. And again, when you work in a studio space attached to a larger venue, what you'll find is that you've spent a lot of time emailing with a head tech, and on the day you get given 2 small children, and that head tech is in the building, and they ignore you all day. They don't even come and say hello because they're working on another show. They don't want to, they don't have to, and they're not personable people like you and I are personable people. I don't feel terribly personal. I feel like it's really hard work when I'm off stage, but I think it is the job, so that we can all work together, even if it is only for 8 hours. So I think there's something about that too, and that I think that's challenging when you go, well, I spent a month brokering this whole thing with you, and I can see you and your cargo pants walking past, going into another room. Just come in and say, I'm Jeff, I've been here with you a month, and I trust these 2 people here, and I trained them. That's all you got to do. Really, really weird how people behave. We're trying to be positive, Russell.
It's okay. I mean, it's okay, isn't it? Just to say the little anecdotes, because they're useful, and it's really nice because I'm hearing exactly the same sort of situations I've been in. Which then, maybe there's a bigger conversation later on to talk about UK touring in general. So maybe I'll think about that and try to get a group of people together, because there is something that needs to be addressed.
There is, and I've alluded to our techies and how invested they are a few times today, and there have been brilliant techs that we've had a great laugh and a great day with. But like your show, mine is about someone who's been dead for 7 years, and nobody under 35 has ever heard of Victoria Wood. When it comes to marketing, do they know who they're marketing to, what they're marketing, who Victoria was? Are they out or looking on my own page? Are they following my socials? Do you know, I'm not managing to be positive here, but I would also tell you that there's a raft of venues that have followed me back on social media after my show was on at their venue.
That's brilliant marketing right there.
I've had others that I've tailored stories, specifically where on this date at this venue. That's what I mean by tailored story. That's me saying that on a video, directly for that venue. And one venue said 2 days before the show, "Oh, I couldn't use that because you'd pronounced our town wrong." Well, you've had it for a month, love. You could have just said, "You pronounced my town wrong. Could you please re-record it?" And I would have done. And another one said, "Oh yeah, I can't tag you because of how we set up our social media." What they mean is they use Hootsuite and it's easier and saves them time. So my socials weren't tagged, so I can't follow and like and share what they've done. So there's not as much strength as there would be. It's laziness, it's shortcuts like that that are very, very annoying. Really, I'm really trying to think of something positive.
Tell us a theatre that just nailed it for you.
The festival theatre, it's just like going to heaven. It's amazing, and it's about facilities, and let's remember that a lot of places up and down the country have got very, very little money. And perhaps one thing we're underestimating this conversation is how tight things are, whether it be resources or staffing. I mean, one venue I went to, on our way out of the door, people were cleaning up, and one lass shouted to some fella in another room, "Have you got any bin bags?" I went, "No, I've got no bin bags today." I mean, how can you be expected to empty the bins of a venue, dressing room, foyer, auditorium? Think of all the rubbish on the floor, all the sweet wrappers and the lolly sticks and stuff, without any bin bags. But she went, "All right, never mind," and she did her best and got on with it anyway. So that is what some venues are dealing with, some underfunded, unloved venues are dealing with. But Chichester is very well funded, is very well loved, and I think the fact that they can support you and provide you with resources, like being able to have a shower, like having a little cot or a bed to lie down after you've been on the road since 8 a.m. that day, coming directly from Halifax because your tour booker yourself is an idiot and doesn't know anything about geography. Making sure that if they're not fed, then maybe they have a cafe and there's a discount in that cafe, and you haven't got to ask. You shouldn't have to say, "I'm performing here today, do I get a discount?" You should be told that, when you arrive. You get 10% off everything, or whatever it is. There is a very, very, very small amount of venues that make it clear what's going to go on, who's going to look after you on the day, where to park, what the situation is with access, if there is a tricky situation with access. They generally tend to be quite bad at saying, "Okay, so we'll see you at this time. We're really looking forward to it. This is where you can park. If there's any problems, phone me." It's not like that at all. It's just You're the next one, in you come, do it, get out again. But Chichester Festival Theatre is the beacon for all to look towards, I would say. That's the positive.
I'd name in the smaller section the Old Joint Stock in Birmingham as well.
Oh, lovely place. Yeah, absolutely.
Again, no hashtag unfunded, completely reliant on their income. And the team that run the Old Joint Stock are brilliant. And it's like a utopia. And it doesn't even feel like it's above the pub theatre, does it? It just feels like a theatre that's on top of a building. It's just it lives on its own. It's brilliant. I love it.
Yes, I would agree. I would also, I'm not jumping in saying I 100% agree with you, simply because it's just changed hands. So we shall see. Is my answer to that one.
Cool. All right,
I think that do you know what I do think is a positive thing to perhaps end on? And you talked about talking about small scale touring more broadly one day, and that's a conversation I'm very much up for having. But perhaps until we sort of get together a little more and create a body, perhaps until such time as we can do that. I alluded to some other solo theatre makers earlier on. I'm not sure how much is going to change. And I think the biggest issue is that we are there so fleetingly. There isn't much point, spending 4 hours on a lighting state for a show that will only be there that one night. And there isn't much point, you know, addressing an issue that's gone wrong with, or perhaps the venues feel that there isn't much point with a venue that's gone tomorrow. They don't want to have that conversation at the moment. They don't want to talk about the impact, the long-term impact, i.e., am I coming back with another show? You know, my director, Sarah, she has, you know, 3 or 4 shows that she could take there. But if I say to her, there are a bunch of idiots, don't go, she won't go there. So they've lost out on 5 potential shows in the future. And I tell you, and you wouldn't go there either, you know. So they're shooting themselves in the foot. And I think that it's becoming clear that our needs as one-nighter shows, perhaps that's more important than the scale of the actual production, is how long we're there. Our needs are very, very different, whether that be marketing or tech or whatever.
Yeah, there's lots to untangle here, and maybe we'll have another conversation at some point. I think what I've learned from today is that sometimes there's a little bit of a disjoint in the thinking. I think this is from a venue's point of view. Like I said earlier, I just like, actually, if we can somehow get all of this writing joined back up again, we can find the connective tissue between what we do and what they do, etc. If they sell out, that's hundreds of emails that could subscribe for other shows.
Yeah.
That's more tickets for their 30%.
Yeah.
Whatever. It's like, actually, it's still down to the bare basics of theatre, which is sell a ticket and make money.
But here's the other thing, Russell, and this again is Chichester. My husband was with me on the day of the Chichester gig, and Janet, who I'd been emailing with, who actually appeared, you know, she was actually a person and shook my hand, you know, we met Janet. But she told my husband, the astonishing thing about this is not that we've sold out 300 seats at the Minerva with a month to go before the show was even on, but the astonishing thing is we don't know these people. These 300 people don't come to other shows. This is a demographic we didn't know about in this area. And for Chichester to say that, and to do it without a single poster or flyer, that tells them a huge amount about who's on their mailing list, who's looking at their brochure, and what they're programming, and whether they're satisfying their audience. Chichester aren't resting on their laurels, and if Chichester Festival Theatre isn't, there's no other venue in the country that has the right to, in my opinion. Because
amazing.
What she's saying is, you and Victoria, not me really, let's face it, it's Vic. Victoria has just brought us 300 people we didn't know about, and that gives us a whole bunch of really exciting data.
Yeah, I sold out at the Greenwich Theatre a month before it opened, and they were really shocked.
Yeah, Janet was too.
It's good though, isn't it?
It's lovely, isn't it? It's great.
Yeah,
it's wonderful, wonderful.
Cool.
And you know, I've had lots of lovely venue comments from theatres up and down the country about you know, how busy it is, and it's so lovely to see the space so busy, or with something different in it. And that's really nice when you do take a chance on a space which wouldn't necessarily come to mind straight away. And I would, you know, there are some wonderful venues out there who are willing to offer some really, really good deals if you're willing to get to them. It's usually that they're in the middle of sodding nowhere. You know, one place offered me a flat fee versus an 80-20 split, and I was, you know, very much like, oh God, I'm sick of promoting my show. I'm sick of going on and on and on about it, you know, and trying to sell tickets. So yeah, I'm taking this buyout, and I won't try very hard on this one. But they did try very hard, so it shows that party is invested. I actually went home with double the guarantee because of how hard they tried, and we had a wonderful time. And one bloke came up to me and said, I've never seen it so busy in this venue ever, and I've been coming here for years, so it was great.
Now what's interesting, just before we finish, we've started talking about flyers, and we've managed to go off onto different tangents, which means it's all connected.
No, well, It is all connected, absolutely. Because this is, you know, it is just the tip of the iceberg, is print being ordered and going in a cupboard. That is just the tip of the iceberg. That's not the real issue. Just like singing along to musicals is not the current issue in big auditoriums.
Right, yeah. Okay, cool. Right. Thank you so much, Paulus, for talking to us today.
My pleasure. Thank you, Russell. Hope we do it again.
All right. Take care.
Bye now.